Hello and welcome to the AI Affairs podcast.
Glad to be here.
Over the last year or so, millions of us have just eagerly outsourced all our tedious, daily busy work to artificial intelligence, right?
Oh, absolutely. Everyone is doing it.
Yeah, we've handed over the spreadsheets, the drafting of those standard boring emails, the data sorting. But some really new research suggests we aren't just outsourcing our administrative headaches.
Right. It's going a lot deeper than that.
Exactly. We might actually be shrinking our brain's physical capacity for critical thought.
Which is wild.
So, welcome to a brand new deep dive into a massive stack of recent research papers, corporate strategy reports, and sweeping new global regulatory frameworks.
It is a huge stack of reading this week.
It really is. And today's deep dive is going to explore how AI is fundamentally rewiring our brains, altering our job satisfaction, and basically forcing a complete redefinition of human oversight.
Yeah, the rules of work are just completely changing.
Totally. And the mission here is simple, but crucial, really. We want to help you understand how to leverage AI efficiently, but without sacrificing your cognitive resilience or, the core meaning of your work.
Which is a very tricky balance to strike.
It is. And to help synthesize this absolute mountain of information, I am joined by our resident expert. Thank you for being here to guide us through this.
Oh, it is a pleasure to be here. We are standing at the edge of, well, arguably the most significant transition in the history of the modern workplace.
Right. It feels that way.
Yeah, because we are moving away from a paradigm where humans simply use tools to accomplish tasks, and we're entering an era where we are essentially co-piloting our entire careers alongside these autonomous decision-making systems.
And before we can even begin to look at the sweeping global rules governing these systems, because we will get to those, we have to start with the individual human brain.
Definitely. The micro level.
Right. We need to look at how this technology actually alters the way we experience our jobs on, say, a random Tuesday morning. And looking at the research, particularly this massive two-wave study out of China by Lu and Lai.
Oh, that study is fascinating.
Yeah, it shows the impact of AI on our daily work engagement is just incredibly complex.
It truly is. And a two-way study is particularly useful here, because it measures employees at two distinct points in time.
Which means it's not just a snapshot, right?
Exactly. It allows us to see actual cause and effect relationships rather than just a snapshot of correlation. And what Lu and Lai found is that AI's impact on work engagement behaves remarkably like an invasive species in a biological ecosystem.
Okay, let's unpack this, an invasive species.
Yeah.
So you mean that if it's introduced carefully, it eats the pests, like the boring, repetitive tasks.
Precise.
But if it's left entirely unchecked, it starts eating the native ecosystem, which would be the core tasks that actually give a person's job meaning.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Let's look at the positive side, the pest control part first.
Okay, let's hear the good news.
Well, when an AI takes over highly mundane mechanical tasks, it drastically increases something researchers call an employee's psychological availability.
Psychological availability, that sounds like having the actual mental bandwidth to deal with a complex problem.
Right.
Rather than arriving at that problem already exhausted from doing like 4 hours of manual data entry.
You are hitting on the core mechanism there. Psychological availability is the perceived amount of cognitive and emotional energy you have in reserve at any given moment.
Because we only have so much, right?
Exactly. Human beings have a finite amount of cognitive load we can bear in a single day. Every time you filter out unnecessary information or manually copy-paste data between software platforms.
Which is the worst.
It really is. You are burning cognitive calories doing that. So when an AI automates that tedious workflow, it stops that calorie burn.
So you're saving up energy.
Right. You are preserving your mental energy, which allows you to focus deeply on creative, strategic, and just profoundly meaningful work.
Makes total sense.
And when workers feel they have this surplus of psychological energy, their overall work engagement skyrockets. They feel empowered.
But then we get to the other side of that invasive species metaphor.
The dark side, yeah.
The native ecosystem gets threatened. Because the research highlights a massive risk called, I think it was core task characteristic substitution.
Yes, core task characteristic substitution.
Right. And this happens when the AI doesn't politely stop after doing the boring stuff.
Yeah.
It starts creeping into the core tasks that give a job its identity, the autonomy, the complex problem solving, the high-level decision making.
And the psychological fallout from that is actually severe.
I can imagine.
If an algorithm takes over the exact specialized tasks that make you feel uniquely valuable to your company, you experience a profound sense of work alienation.
Like you're just a bystander.
Basically, yeah. You begin to feel separated from your daily output, powerless to influence outcomes, and just entirely disconnected from the broader goals of the organization.
You know, it makes me think of a high-end restaurant kitchen.
Okay, I like this. Go on.
It's like having a robotic sous chef. If the robot sous chef just chops the onions and peels the potatoes, the human head chef is absolutely thrilled because it saves hours of prep time.
Right, that's the pest control.
Exactly. But if the robot also designs the seasonal menu, perfectly cooks the main course, and adjusts the seasoning for the final dish.
The chef is out of a job.
Well, yeah, the head chef suddenly looks around and realizes they are entirely useless to the operation.
What's fascinating here is how predictably human psychology reacts to that exact scenario, which is perfectly explained by the conservation of resources theory.
The conservation of resources theory.
Yeah, it's a psychological framework showing that humans are fundamentally evolutionarily driven to acquire and heavily protect valuable resources.
And we're not just talking about money here.
No, not at all. In a workplace, those resources aren't just your salary. They include your time, your mental energy, your autonomy, and your sense of professional identity.
So when the AI is just chopping the onions, the chef feels like they're gaining resources, like more time, more energy to be creative.
Correct. They enter what organizational psychologists call a gain spiral.
Like gain spiral, okay.
They feel rich in resources, so they invest more of themselves into the work. But when the chef realizes the AI is now designing the menu, they feel their unique value and professional identity being stripped away.
So they panic.
They perceive it as a severe existential threat to their resources. And to protect whatever psychological stability they have left, they enter a loss spiral.
Wow. A loss spiral.
Yeah, they actively emotionally detach from their work. They quietly quit or mentally check out as a defense mechanism to protect themselves from the intense stress of feeling obsolete.
I mean, if my job doesn't actually require my brain anymore, checking out seems like the most logical biological response.
It really is.
And that biological response bridges us perfectly into the next major revelation in these sources.
The cognitive shift.
Exactly, because if AI takes over our core tasks and our daily decision-making, we aren't just talking about hurt feelings or alienation.
No, it's physical.
Right. We are talking about a physical alteration in the architecture of human thought. The data shows an actual cognitive shift in how our brains operate.
We are diving into the phenomenon known as cognitive offloading.
Cognitive offloading.
Yeah. On a basic level, cognitive offloading is any time we use external tools to reduce the processing load on our brain's working memory.
Like writing a grocery list instead of trying to memorize 15 different items.
Exactly. Or using a calendar app to remember appointments.
Hmm.
From an evolutionary standpoint, the human brain is it's a cognitive miser.
A cognitive miser, so we're just wired to be lazy.
Essentially, yes. The brain consumes roughly 20% of our body's resting energy, so it is evolutionarily hardwired to seek shortcuts and save calories wherever possible.
Okay, so we're built to offload thinking.
We are. But AI takes this natural biological urge to an unprecedented extreme.
How bad is it?
Well, the research data we are analyzing reveals a staggering negative correlation, specifically an R value of negative 0.68 between the use of AI tools and an individual's critical thinking skills.
Okay, wait, let's unpack that stat for a second. Because a negative 0.68 correlation isn't just a minor trend.
No, it is highly significant.
Yeah, in statistics, an R value of 1 is a perfect lockstep, and 0 means there is no relationship at all. So a negative 0.68 means that as your AI use goes up, your critical thinking scores take a steep, direct, and undeniable nosedive.
It is a massive statistical relationship. The academic literature compares this to the Google effect.
Right, from like 20 years ago.
Exactly, where people learn to remember where to find information rather than remembering the facts themselves. But what we are observing with generative AI is far more concerning.
Because it's not just facts anymore?
Right. We are seeing the rapid onset of cognitive laziness.
Yeah.
Because AI provides instant, highly polished, ready-made solutions to complex problems, users are entirely deprived of the opportunity to engage in deep, reflective problem solving.
They never have to struggle.
They never wrestle with the friction of finding an answer. And without that friction, their internal cognitive abilities actually begin to atrophy.
I hear that, but I have to push back a little here.
Okay, good.
Didn't we say the exact same thing about pocket calculators in the 1980s?
You did, yes.
Like, everyone panicked that calculators would destroy our ability to do math, but all it really did was stop us from wasting time doing long division by hand so we could focus on algebra and calculus.
That's a common comparison.
Are we genuinely losing our ability to think? Or are we just making room for higher level, more complex thinking?
That is the conventional wisdom. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the data shows something entirely different.
Really? How so?
There is a fundamental difference in the mechanism of a calculator versus the mechanism of an artificial intelligence. A calculator performs rote arithmetic.
Right. It just crunches the numbers.
But you still have to look at a real-world problem, decide what equation to formulate, input the correct variables, and then determine what the output means in the context of your project.
So you still own the logic.
Exactly. With AI, studies show that increased trust in these tools directly reduces the user's engagement in the critical analysis itself. We aren't just offloading the arithmetic, we are offloading our judgment.
Wow. We're letting the machine decide what the problem is, what the best course of action is, and what the final product should look like.
Precisely. And the ultimate danger of offloading judgment is a catastrophic loss of cognitive resilience.
Meaning when things go wrong.
Meaning when the AI system goes offline, or when a worker is suddenly faced with a novel, unpredictable situation that the AI hasn't been trained on, the worker completely lacks the cognitive flexibility to make an independent decision.
Because they haven't been practicing that mental muscle.
They have effectively outsourced their critical thought, and when the crutch is removed, they cannot walk.
And if we take that individual cognitive laziness and scale it up to an entire institution, say, a hospital network, an international bank, or a criminal justice department, it creates a terrifying systemic vulnerability.
It leads to entire organizations blindly trusting machines.
The sources refer to this specific phenomenon as automation bias, correct?
Yes, automation bias, which is sometimes called automation complacency.
Automation complacency.
It is the psychological tendency for humans to overtrust automated systems to the point where they will actively rationalize away glaring algorithmic anomalies.
Because our brains are cognitive misers trying to save energy.
Exactly. If a highly sophisticated computer says something is true, we naturally assume it is true, even if our own common sense or direct observation might suggest otherwise.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've all experienced a low-stakes version of this with GPS navigation.
Oh, absolutely. The classic example.
We've all mindlessly followed a GPS straight into a massive traffic jam, or down a visibly closed road, or into a lake, simply because the blue line on the screen told us to.
We trusted the screen more than we trusted our own eyes looking out the windshield.
Exactly. But doing that on a road trip is one thing. Doing that with a medical diagnosis or a criminal investigation is completely terrifying.
The stakes alter the entire equation. The sources outline a chilling reality in medical diagnostics, for example.
How does that look?
Well, historically, a doctor bore the absolute full responsibility for a diagnosis based on their holistic comprehension of a patient's facts, history, and symptoms.
Right. They own the liability because they own the critical thinking.
But today, if an AI analyzes an MRI image and confidently suggests a diagnosis,
And the doctor has automation complacency.
yes, if the doctor blindly follows that advice without aggressively querying the AI's logic, who is actually accountable if the patient is harmed by a misdiagnosis?
The doctor will say they were following the hospital's $1 million diagnostic software.
And the software developers will say the AI is just a supplementary tool, and the doctor makes the final call,
So everyone just points the finger at someone else.
which creates exactly what researchers call an accountability vacuum.
An accountability vacuum.
In heavily automated systems, no single human feels the weight of responsibility because the machine effectively made the decision.
That is unsettling.
And this accountability vacuum becomes exponentially more dangerous when we factor in the reality of systemic bias.
Right, because AI isn't perfect.
Far from it. These AI models are often black boxes that process information in ways even their creators don't fully understand. They are trained on massive data sets that frequently contain historical human biases.
The sources cite a specific MIT Media Lab study that highlights exactly this danger.
Yes, they looked at facial recognition software.
And they found error rates of up to 35% when the system was analyzing dark-skinned women, compared to near-perfect accuracy for lighter-skinned men.
That MIT study is a foundational example of flawed training data. So imagine the compounding effect. You have a fundamentally flawed system with a 35% error rate for a specific demographic. You deploy that system in a high-stakes environment like law enforcement or hiring.
And then you put a lazy human in charge.
You place a human operator in charge who is suffering from automation bias, whose brain wants to save calories by simply agreeing with the machine.
So that human operator is just going to rubber stamp the machine's outputs.
Exactly. You're no longer just making occasional errors. You are baking systemic, algorithmic discrimination into the foundational operations of your society.
Which raises an incredibly urgent question.
How do we stop it?
Yeah. If human psychology naturally defaults to trusting the machine to save cognitive energy, then relying on corporations or government agencies to just self-regulate and promise to be careful is a complete recipe for disaster.
We are biologically wired to be lazy overseers.
Right.
That exact realization is what has triggered global lawmakers to finally intervene.
So the regulators are stepping in.
Yes. Regulators have recognized that because the psychological, cognitive, and societal risks are so severe, they must legally force institutions to keep their hands firmly on the steering wheel.
We can't just rely on good intentions.
No, we need binding legal frameworks. And that brings us to the centerpiece of the new regulatory landscape, the EU AI Act.
The EU AI Act officially came into force in August 2024. With full compliance phasing in over the next few years.
It is widely considered the world's first comprehensive, binding legal framework for artificial intelligence.
And it takes a tiered approach, right? Classifying AI systems into categories of minimal, limited, high, or unacceptable risk.
Yes. And the mechanism that directly combats the automation bias we've been discussing is found in Article 14 of the Act.
Article 14, what does that do?
It legally mandates a concept known as human oversight, specifically for any system categorized as high risk.
So things like biometric identification, critical infrastructure management, or automated hiring platforms.
Exactly.
So what does that actually look like in practice? The term in the industry is a human in the loop, or HITL, right?
Yes, HITL.
But that can't just mean having a human physically sitting in the room while the server runs.
No, it is a rigid legal standard. To satisfy the human-in-the-loop requirement under the EU AI Act, the human overseer must fully comprehend the AI's relevant capacities and its specific limitations.
They really need to know how it works.
And they must be explicitly trained to be aware of their own psychological tendency toward automation bias.
Oh, wow. So they have to be trained to fight their own brain's laziness.
They cannot just be passive observers. They must actively possess the authority and the technical means to disregard, override, or entirely reverse the AI's output.
They need a functional stop button that they are actually allowed to press without getting fired.
Exactly. And for certain highly sensitive systems, like remote biometric identification, the law goes even further.
Further than a stop button.
Much further. The AI's output cannot trigger any real-world action unless that output has been separately verified and explicitly confirmed by at least two competent natural persons.
Wait, so if a high-risk security system flags an individual, one human agreeing with the computer isn't legally enough?
No.
Two separate human beings have to independently review the data, challenge the machine, and sign off.
That is the requirement.
So what does this all mean for the everyday business landscape? It sounds like you can't just buy a shiny new AI tool from a vendor, plug it into your HR or finance department, and, walk away to play golf.
It means the era of the automated black box is ending, at least for critical decisions affecting human lives.
It's about time.
This legislation essentially outlaws the rubber stamping of automated decisions in high-risk sectors. The European Commission recognized that human oversight only adds societal value when the reviewers have the meaningful ability, the technical authority, and the cognitive resilience to intervene.
So the pressure is really on the companies now.
Huge pressure. If you are a company operating within the EU, or if your digital operations affect EU citizens, you are now legally accountable for ensuring your employees are actively interrogating the AI, not just mindlessly clicking approve.
But I see a massive, immediate practical roadblock here.
Just one.
Well, a big one. You can mandate human oversight in a legal document all day long, but you can't successfully execute that mandate If the humans sitting at the desks don't actually have the skills to oversee the AI?
That is the multi-billion-dollar issue.
Right. If an AI is generating a 40-page predictive financial analysis, the human reviewer has to be smart enough and mathematically literate enough to know when the AI is hallucinating a statistic or drawing a flawed correlation.
Which brings us to the urgent need for corporate reskilling. The skills gap currently facing the global economy is immense.
Because people just don't know how to audit these systems yet.
Exactly. Large, well-resourced enterprises are realizing that deploying AI is not a simple IT software upgrade. It is a fundamental change management crisis.
Look at the financial sector data detailed in our sources. Citigroup recently launched a massive internal initiative.
To train 175,000 of their employees specifically in prompt engineering.
That's incredible.
Meanwhile, Bank of America reports they have achieved a 90% AI adoption rate across their entire workforce.
I get that a mega bank has the capital to afford training 175,000 people, but what does that training actually look like in the context of cognitive resilience?
That's the key question.
Are they just teaching their staff how to type better, more polite questions into ChatGPT? Or are they teaching them how to forensically audit the AI's math so they don't fall victim to automation bias?
It is entirely focused on the latter. The goal of these massive corporate training programs is to evolve their workforce into what the academic research calls agent bosses.
Agent bosses, I like that term.
An agent boss is an employee who doesn't just passively consume AI outputs. They actively manage, orchestrate, and audit a fleet of specialized AI tools.
So they are the ones in charge, not the machine.
Right. They are trained to be deeply skeptical. They apply responsible, ethical governance to the data, ensuring the machine's output aligns with reality. These corporations are actively spending millions to ensure their employees maintain their cognitive resilience.
But that creates an incredibly uneven playing field, doesn't it?
Oh, massively.
Because when you look at the other end of the corporate spectrum, small and medium enterprises, or SMEs, the reality is completely different.
The contrast is jarring. SMEs are facing existential hurdles in this transition. The sources include a comprehensive study by the IF Göttingen, which highlights that mid-sized companies critically lack internal AI competency and basic IT infrastructure.
So they don't have the experts on staff.
Right. Because they don't have in-house experts, they are forced to become heavily dependent on third-party external service providers.
Which entirely removes their direct oversight.
Precisely.
And beyond the lack of technical skills, they are absolutely paralyzed by legal uncertainty. We just talked about the EU AI Act, but SMEs are terrified of how these new AI rules clash with existing privacy laws like GDPR.
It's a regulatory minefield for them.
Meaning, how do you train a large language model on your customer data to make it useful without violating strict European laws regarding the right to be forgotten or the protection of personal data?
You can't just easily delete one person's data from a neural network once it's trained.
Exactly. A mega bank has an army of lawyers to figure that out. A local logistics firm does not.
And that local firm certainly lacks the financial resources to implement the kind of wide-scale, intensive agent boss training programs that Citigroup is running.
So they're just stuck.
They're stuck in a paralyzed state of wait and see.
It really is a tale of two realities. The mega corporations are building an elite army of highly trained agent bosses who understand how to command and audit the machines.
While the local mid-sized accounting firm is just trying to figure out if it's legally safe to let a chatbot read their Excel spreadsheets without facing a massive data privacy fine.
And this disparity is what will define the next decade of the economy.
Without a doubt. Because across all of these sources, from the psychological studies in China to the regulatory frameworks in Europe, the ultimate vision for the future of work is not humans being replaced.
What is it then?
The vision is human-machine synthesis.
Human-machine synthesis.
The goal is for humans and machines to amplify one another's distinct strengths. Machines possess incredible advantages in processing speed, vast data scale, and invisible pattern recognition.
But machines entirely lack contextual understanding, human empathy, and moral reasoning.
Exactly. A machine doesn't have the human context.
Right. It doesn't understand why a particular business decision matters to the community or how a misdiagnosis will destroy a family.
It just knows what the statistical probability of the next word in a sentence is.
That's all it is at the end of the day.
But here is the critical inflection point. Because of the cognitive offloading and the automation bias we discussed earlier, fewer and fewer human beings are actually practicing deep analytical thought.
We are letting our mental muscles atrophy.
We are. Therefore, genuine human critical thinking, The ability to hold context, audit logic, and apply moral reasoning is rapidly becoming the ultimate scarce good in the global economy.
The ultimate scarce good. I love that phrasing.
The organizations and individuals that succeed in the next era won't be the ones who simply possess the fastest algorithms.
They will be the ones whose human workers have fiercely protected their cognitive depth, allowing them to manage those algorithms responsibly. So, what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've covered an incredible amount of ground today.
We really have.
To quickly summarize, we've explored how AI in the workplace behaves like an invasive species. Used thoughtfully, it automates the tedious work, reduces your cognitive load, and drastically boosts your psychological availability.
But if left unchecked, it substitutes your core meaningful tasks, triggering a loss spiral that leaves you alienated and detached.
We've examined the physical reality of cognitive offloading, how outsourcing our judgment causes our critical thinking skills to atrophy, leading directly to automation bias and terrifying accountability vacuums in high-stakes industries.
And finally, we've seen how global regulations like the EU AI Act are legally mandating human-in-the-loop oversight to prevent algorithmic disaster.
Which in turn is forcing a massive corporate upskilling race to create a new class of deeply skeptical, highly trained agent bosses.
It's a whole new world.
It is. If human labor, contextual empathy, and critical thinking are truly becoming the ultimate scarce goods in an AI-driven economy, then your brain is more valuable now than ever before.
Absolutely.
So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. What is the one uniquely human skill you possess? Your specific contextual understanding, your empathy, your strategic intuition that no statistical algorithm could ever replicate.
A great question to ask yourself.
And more importantly, how are you actively protecting that specific skill from the slow, seductive creep of cognitive laziness? Take a hard look at your own daily AI use this week. Ask yourself, are you using it as a precision tool to enhance your unique capabilities, or are you slowly letting it become a crutch that does all of your heavy thinking for you?
Use the tool, don't let the tool use you.
Well said. Thank you for listening, and see you next time on AI Affairs.